الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. Welcome to Incognito Islamic Productions. I'm your brother Kareem from the YouTube channel Kareem Ubaidullah the Tutor. Today our topic will be, is the Jesus that is portrayed in the Bible a perfect man? It's typical of Christians to boast with pride about the character of the biblical Jesus, thinking that anyone who reads about him will be so amazed by the beautiful character of this man that they will immediately submit to the gospel at once. Well, this only works for people who allow their emotions to take over their intellect. I have read the Gospels, and as a so-called God incarnate, I don't find the biblical Jesus to be impressive at all. Let me give some reasons as to why I am not impressed by the biblical Jesus as portrayed in the Bible. Number one, the biblical Jesus wasn't a great example of how to talk to one's mother. Number two, the biblical Jesus didn't know how to preach properly. Number three, the biblical Jesus told his disciples to take a donkey and colt without the owner's permission. Number four, the biblical Jesus didn't make it a sin to call non-Christians fools. Number five, the biblical Jesus was a curse. Number six, the biblical Jesus accused God of abandoning him. Number seven, the biblical Jesus showed unwillingness to do his mission. Number eight, the biblical Jesus referred to the Gentiles as dogs. Number nine, the biblical Jesus refused to heal a sick child until his mother pressured him. Number 10, the biblical Jesus taught us to love Satan. Number 11, the biblical Jesus instituted an unfair law of divorce. Number 12, the biblical Jesus purposely goes out to be tempted by the devil. Number 13, the biblical Jesus didn't let one disciple attend his father's funeral or the other to bid his family farewell. Number 14, the biblical Jesus prioritized himself over the poor. Number 15, the biblical Jesus didn't offer practical solutions to the world's problems. Let me start validating these claims by discussing the biblical Jesus not being a great example of how to talk to one's mother. Let us observe how the biblical Jesus spoke to his mother. In the Gospel of John 2 verse 3 and 4, when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Dear mother, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My time has not yet come." This is definitely not an appropriate way to speak to your mother. Why do you involve me? How can a respectable role model say such a thing to his mother? In another passage, the biblical Jesus says in Matthew 12:47-49, someone told him, "Your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you." He replied to him, "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" Pointing to his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers." New Testament scholar Craig L. Bloomberg says in his commentary, Jesus does not directly address his family but does implicitly rebuke them. They deserve no preferential treatment. Human kinship does not take priority over spiritual kinship, and Jesus is busy ministering to crowds that include his spiritual family. Matthew does say what Mary thought of her unusual son at this point in his career, but the most natural reading of Mark 3:21 would include her amongst those who thought he was out of his mind. His brothers are singularly unimpressed and in no way yet his supporters. Given the strong family ties in ancient Palestine, Jesus' attitude here would have proved as shocking as in 822 and 1037 New American commentary on Matthew 12:48-50. And so on and so forth. It appears that even Jesus' mother and disciples had a problem with his attitude to the extent that they thought he was out of his mind. Let us now see if the biblical Jesus knew how to preach properly. I think you will see that the New Testament makes Jesus into a very bad preacher. Matthew 23:33, "You snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell?" Luke 11:40, "You foolish people, did not the one who made the outsides make the inside also?" Matthew 16:23, Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men." What type of perfect role model is this to follow? He went around insulting people while he preached, while at the same time he told his followers to show love to their enemies. He even went so far as calling one of his disciples Satan. Why couldn't Jesus be more patient and hold his tongue? Jesus even got physical at times. John 2:15. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found men selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple area, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of money changers and overturned the tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a market?" Why would Jesus have to do such a thing? This story seems to teach us that vigilantism is okay at times. Also, the biblical Jesus told his disciples to take a donkey and colt without the owner's permission. In Matthew 21, 1-3, as they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage, on the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there with her colt by her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, tell them that the Lord needs it, and he will send them right away." I don't think that Jesus' orders given by the gospel writers were ethical at this point. You must ask the owner for permission to borrow something from him. Some will argue that Jesus needed the donkey to fulfill a prophecy, but why would God want Jesus to commit a sin in order to fulfill a prophecy? Next, we look at how the biblical Jesus didn't make it a sin to call non-Christians fools. Jesus made it clear that one cannot call his brother, that is, spiritual brother, a fool. Matthew 5:22 reads, "But I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother Raka is answerable to Sanhedrin. But anyone who says, 'You fool,' will be in danger of the hellfire." Brother in the above verse does not mean brother in humanity, because if it did, then Jesus would be a hypocrite, for he would have broken his own command. In Matthew 23:17, he says, "You fools, which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred?" So it seems that Jesus made it a big deal for one to call his Christian brother a fool, while he didn't see the same warning or condemnation if one were to do it with a non-Christian. Now let's see how the New Testament makes Jesus out to be a curse. The biblical Jesus, as defined in Galatians 3:13, was a curse. It reads, "Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hung on a tree." Now that's not a nice thing to be, now is it? Now let's examine how the New Testament makes the biblical Jesus accuse God of abandoning him. Jesus allegedly said on the cross, Matthew 27:46, "Ilahi, Ilahi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" How can a righteous prophet speak to his Lord in such a way? How can he accuse God of forsaking him, especially when God has promised not to forsake those who truly seek him and are truly faithful? Psalms 9:10, Psalms 37:28. The next point is that the biblical Jesus showed unwillingness to do his mission. In Matthew 26:39, it says, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken away from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Mark 14:37, "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will." Luke 27:41 and 42, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." This shows that Jesus kept complaining to his Father, asking him to end the mission. Why would Jesus continue doing such a thing if he supposedly knew that his crucifixion would and was bound to happen? If he was a perfect role model, shouldn't he have been motivated to do God's will instead of being depressed and hesitant about it? Another point in our discussion is that the biblical Jesus referred to the Gentiles as dogs. The biblical Jesus said in Matthew 15:26, he replied, "It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it